The Babysitter. The Babysitter's story is a scary story based on an urban legend about a teenager girl who is babysitting 3 children one night when she receives a creepy phone call from a strange man. It is also known as The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. A version of this tale appeared in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. There was a young girl who was in need of a job and was able to find work as a babysitter for a couple who lived in a large isolated old house. They were going out to see a movie that night and left the teenager babysitter in charge of their 3 young children. The babysitter put the children to bed when it got late and then went downstairs to watch some television. She was just getting comfortable when she heard the phone ringing. When she answered it, all she heard was heavy breathing, followed by a man's voice asking, "Have you checked on the children?" Freaked out, she hung up the phone, trying to convince herself that it was just someone playing a practical joke on her. She went back to watching television, but about 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. She picked up the receiver and heard hysterical laughter from the other end of the line. Then the same voice asked, "Why haven't you checked on the children?" The babysitter slammed down the phone. The poor girl was frightened out of her wits and immediately called the police. The operator at the police station told the babysitter that if the man called again, she should try to keep him talking. That would give the police time to trace the call. A few minutes later, the phone rang a third time, and when the babysitter answered it, she heard the heavy breathing again. The voice on the line said, "You should really check on the children." The babysitter listened to him, laughing hysterically for a long time. She hung up the phone again, and almost immediately it rang again. This time it was the operator from the police station who yelled, "Get out of the house right now. The calls are coming from the upstairs phone." The babysitter dropped the phone in shock, and suddenly she heard heavy footsteps walking down the stairs. Without pausing for a second, she ran out of the house as fast as her legs would carry her. Just as she closed the front door behind her, a man's hand slammed against the glass. She screamed and ran out into the street just as the police car was pulling up outside. The police searched the house and found the 2 children upstairs hiding in the closet crying uncontrollably. In the parents' bedroom, they found the bloody axe lying on the floor next to the upstairs phone. The back window was wide open and the curtains were blowing in the breeze. There was no sign of the madman who had made the phone calls. He had escaped into the night when the police arrived and managed to interrupt his horrible plan to kill the 2 children and the poor babysitter. Luxury Hotel. The Luxury Hotel is a creepy story about a vanishing lady and a daughter who may or may not be insane. A mother and daughter were traveling together in Europe. When they arrived in Paris, they booked into a luxury hotel. The mother was feeling quite poorly and decided to go to bed early. The daughter was a little worried and sent for the hotel doctor, who examined the mother and wrote out a prescription. The daughter then sent out into the city to find a pharmacy and buy the medicine for her mother. What should have been a simple errand ended up taking the daughter almost 4 hours, mainly because she spoke little or no French. She searched the entire city and eventually managed to find a pharmacy that was still open. Finally, the frustrated daughter arrived back at the hotel with the medicine, only to discover that her mother's room completely empty. It was as if her mother had just vanished into thin air. In fact, the hotel room looked completely different. The carpet, the wallpaper, and the curtains all had different patterns. The bed was made and looked as if it had never been slept in. All of their luggage was nowhere to be found. When the confused daughter stopped a cleaning lady in the corridor and asked where her mother was, she was met with a blank stare. In fact, all of the hotel staff denied ever seeing the mother and daughter before. The hotel manager even said he had no record of them ever checking in to the hotel. At this point, the daughter became frantic and she fled to the embassy, where she was greeted by sympathetic officials who wouldn't believe her story. Instead, they doubt that her mother ever existed and decided that the daughter must be crazy. Trapped in a nightmare, the young girl ended up being sent to a mental hospital, where she died years later, completely insane. Runaway Bride. Runaway Bride is a creepy story about a young man whose wife goes missing during a holiday in Paris. A few years ago, a young man and his new bride went to Paris for their honeymoon. While the happy couple were wandering around the city, taking in the sights, they decided to do some shopping. The wife went to a trendy clothes shop and tried on several dresses, while the husband waited outside the dressing room. After a long time passed and the wife didn't come out, the husband began to wonder what was taking her so long. He asked one of the female shop assistants to go into the dressing room and tell his wife to hurry up. The assistant came out and said that his wife wasn't in there. In disbelief, he checked it himself and found the dressing room completely empty. They searched the entire shop but could find no trace of her. The husband thought that his wife must have been playing a practical joke on him, so he returned to their hotel and waited for her. But his wife never showed up. As the hours passed, he became more and more anxious. When she had not returned by the following morning, he was distraught and contacted the Paris police. Within 48 hours, all of the Parisian authorities were looking for the missing American bride. They issued a description of her to radio stations and TV news channels. She was described as a tall American woman, 24 years old, with a birthmark on her left cheek. It seemed as if everyone in Paris was on the lookout for the missing woman, but to no avail. Nobody had seen her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The police did what they could, but after 3 weeks they gave up on their search. The husband began to suspect that his bride had second thoughts about their marriage and must have simply run away and left him. 6 months later, exhausted and depressed, the husband finally left Paris and returned to the USA. As months turned into years, the man had given up on finding his beautiful wife, but his life had totally fallen apart. He was so filled with grief that he was unable to hold a job or go on with his life. He took to wandering aimlessly from place to place, country to country, letting fate take him where it may. 2 years later, he found himself in the Philippines during a carnival. He stopped in front of a freak show in a shady old tent. The sign above the entrance read, "The House of Oddities." Curious, the man entered and was disgusted at what lay within. Crouched in cages, he saw a collection of hideously deformed freaks. The bizarre denizens were terrifying examples of human misery. In the last filthy cage, he was horrified to see the featured attraction, a twisted, scarred, and mutilated woman rocking back and forth and grunting strange, animal-like noises. The sign on her cage read, "The Worm Woman." She had no arms or legs. They had been hacked off, and just her torso remained. Her face was covered with jagged scars from horrible operations, and her mouth was sewn shut. As she turned her sad eyes up to look at him, the husband screamed as he recognized the birthmark on his wife's face. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We will greatly appreciate it. Thank you.